All right, today we are diving deep into a book that has stirred up a ton of controversy since it first came out back in 1999. We're going to break down the central ideas of David Icke's The Biggest Secret, which claims to uncover a hidden history of all of humanity. So let's jump right into the source material.
Right out of the gate, the author hits you with this pretty serious warning. This isn't your average book. It's presented as something that's meant to completely shatter your reality. It really sets a dramatic stage for some of the wild claims that are about to come.
So what's the core idea here? Well, the book argues there's this secret plan, an agenda that's been unfolding for thousands of years with one single chilling goal: the total enslavement of every single person on Earth, mentally, emotionally, and physically.
Okay, so you're probably wondering, how could anyone even pull off an agenda that huge? The book claims it's all built on some very specific methods of control, and that's what we're going to get into in this first section.
The source pictures this control system like a pyramid. Way up at the tiny little point at the top, you've got a small elite group that holds all the important knowledge. And then the rest of us, the masses, are kept in the dark down at the bottom, which makes us really easy to manipulate. This whole idea, keep them divided, keep them ignorant, is presented as the absolute cornerstone of their control. So the main technique the book says they use to move this agenda forward is something called problem-reaction solution. It's actually pretty simple. First, you secretly create a problem, right? Like a financial crash or a major conflict. Then, you sit back and wait for the public to react, screaming, "Somebody has to do something." And that's when you step in and offer your solution, which, surprise, surprise, always seems to involve giving up more freedom for more security.
Well, this all leads to a pretty obvious question, doesn't it? If there really is some secret group pulling all the strings, who exactly are they? The book claims it has the answer.
So the source identifies the masterminds behind all this, not as some random group, but as a network of very specific, interconnected families, what it calls the interbreeding bloodlines.
The book calls this group the Brotherhood. It says they're a tribe of interbreeding families whose roots go way back to the ancient Middle and Near East. From there, they supposedly became the royal and aristocratic families of Europe, and then they used the massive reach of the British Empire to spread their power and their genetics all over the planet, including into the United States.
And to really drive this point home, the book makes a very specific claim. It says that out of the first 40 U.S. presidents, a whopping 33 of them can be traced back genetically to just two people: Alfred the Great of England and the famous Emperor Charlemagne. The key takeaway here is the intense focus on bloodlines and genetics.
You know, tracing family trees through recent history is one thing, but this book goes way, way farther back. So where did these families ultimately come from? This is where the story takes a pretty massive turn into the extraordinary.
The next layer of this theory suggests that the origin of these bloodlines, and the whole agenda, isn't from Earth at all. According to the source material, it's extraterrestrial. Citing translations of ancient Sumerian tablets, the book introduces us to a group called the Anunnaki, and the translation it gives for that name is pretty literal: those who from heaven to earth came. The book is clear. These weren't mythical gods, but actual physical beings who walked the earth among early humans.
According to the book's interpretation of these ancient texts, the Anunnaki showed up here almost 500,000 years ago. They came from a planet called Nibiru, and their main goal was to mine for gold in Africa. With their incredible technology, it's no wonder that early humans saw them as gods.
And this ancient history was apparently far from peaceful. The book says it was marked by these insane, planet-altering catastrophes. I mean, the timeline it lays out is just staggering. A disaster around 11,000 BC wipes out a global golden age. Then, thousands of years later, the planet Venus supposedly shows up and causes a 10,000-foot tidal wave. And as recently as 1500 BC, Mars allegedly swung by for a close pass and caused even more destruction.
So, if these advanced beings were on Earth mining for resources, how did they get along with the locals? Well, this leads us to one of the book's most fundamental claims about where our species actually comes from.
The source material argues that we, modern humans, Homo sapiens, didn't just evolve naturally. Instead, it claims we were the product of genetic engineering.
So the story goes like this. The lower-ranking Anunnaki got sick of doing all the hard labor in the gold mines, so they rebelled. The Anunnaki leaders needed a new workforce, so they decided to create one. They allegedly took their own genes and mixed them with the genes of the native hominids already on Earth. The result was the first Homo sapiens, a hybrid being that the Sumerians supposedly called a Lulu, which means one who has been mixed.
And the book offers this direct quote from those ancient texts, which it says spells out the intention crystal clear: to create a primitive worker, to bear the yoke, and do the heavy lifting for the gods.
Okay, so let's recap. We have a secret agenda run by ancient bloodlines that are supposedly part alien, who in turn allegedly created humanity as a slave race. You'd think that's as crazy as it gets, right? But the book claims there is one final, shocking piece of the puzzle. The biggest secret of them all.
This brings us to the book's most famous and, by far, its most controversial claim. This is the idea that gives the book its title.
The book asserts that the Anunnaki are, in fact, part of a reptilian genetic stream. It describes them as a reptilian race that has been controlling our planet for millennia. This is the absolute core claim that the rest of the theory is really built on. The source then goes on to describe the supposed traits of this reptilian race. It says they're cold-blooded, often much taller than us, and incredibly intelligent, but they lack emotional depth and struggle to express love. The book presents these characteristics as being fundamentally alien to our own. And for evidence, the book points to all the serpent and dragon imagery we see in ancient cultures all over the world, from Quetzalcoatl in Central America, to the Nagas in India, to the dragon ruler of ancient Britain. The source argues these aren't just symbols, it claims they're actual historical representations of a real reptilian presence that ancient people knew all about.
And so this explainer of the biggest secret ends right where the book's own introduction does, with a provocative question aimed squarely at you, the reader. After laying out its entire case for this hidden agenda, the source concludes that whether it succeeds or fails all comes down to one thing. Is humanity going to stay ignorant, or is it going to wake up?